It's been 13 years since the first Space Marine came out, and so when I heard someone put together a real sequel, I was actually pretty shocked. I had a lot of fond memories from the original game, and back then my only experience with Warhammer came from the video games themselves. Wasn't really into the specific lore. I didn't have any books. I didn't have any minis. But now that I've gone pretty deep into the miniature game, I have a much better grasp of what's going on in the universe, and I understand the factions and the Space Marine chapters and all that good stuff. So as a result, I was probably a lot more excited about this one than I was the first one, despite the fact that the first one was so great and looked so amazing. Space Marine 2 came out on September 9th, and as of this recording, it left early access for everyone to jump in. I finished the main campaign a couple days ago, and all around, I did enjoy it. I still have some criticisms, which I'll get into in a few minutes, but when I compare it to the first one, I think I actually liked the first one more. But simply put, Space Marine 2 is definitely worth playing. So if that's all you care about, if you just wanted to hear that I liked it enough to where I'd recommend it to folks, then there you go. That's my recommendation. But I do have a lot of caveats and some criticisms that might help further inform you on what you're going to get with Space Marine. I'm going to take this in sections, and I'm going to start with graphics. I don't have a whole lot to say about this, but they are above and beyond some of the better graphics I've seen in a while. The particle effects, the backgrounds, the characters, they're all amazing. If you can ignore clipping, which unfortunately is a pet peeve of mine, then you've got top-notch in every department. I did see far too many moments where a character's arm casually drifted through a piece of their armor. That was kind of annoying, especially considering how much they put into the attention to detail. But from the way the guns light up to the motions and animations and the gore upon a particularly grisly execution, it's an absolutely beautiful game, and my 4090 presented it well. I did play this on PC. The controls. Okay, so the controls took some time to get used to. On an Xbox controller, you use the right bumper to swing the melee weapon, with the left bumper acting as a parry. The A button dodges, but to really get out of the way, you have to hit it twice. B throws a grenade, X activates switches and that sort of thing, while the Y button uses a special ability. There's different ones depending on what you're doing. The left trigger zooms, right trigger fires. Clicking the right stick initiates an execution. But using those top buttons gave me fits for the first, half hour or so. Once I got the hang of it, it wasn't a big deal, but something to keep in mind. Don't get frustrated if it feels weird at first. It'll be fine quick enough. Gameplay. The standard loop for Space Marine 2 is get an objective, fight a ton of enemies on the way to that objective, rally for some story, then repeat. Smaller enemies go down easily and quickly, while bigger ones are an absolute sponge for damage. Which is probably my first real complaint. No matter what gun I used, with the exception of the Melt-A-Gun, everyone took way too many shots. Even with the Thunderhammer, the bigger mobs just wouldn't go down very quickly. And that got old after a while. While the smaller dudes would explode when you were swinging your weapon around, they could actually do a fair amount of damage when they jump on you and do that kind of stuff. But all around, I really didn't enjoy having to just unload dozens of shots into what effectively became standard enemies. And it really did get old after a while, to the point that fighting the Tyrannid became kind of boring. While they're gorgeous and they have a ton of great animations and attacks, they aren't the most exciting enemy to fight. After about an hour and a half, I was sick of them. In contrast to the old game, you fight the orcs. As a horde army, they throw tons of boys at you all the time as well, but the difference was they got to insult you and freak out and shout words, and they just had more personality, and the Tyranids, they just kind of scream. And while listening to the orcs complain and say the same lines for hours on end, it started to get old too, but there was just something about it that made it okay, which I'll get into when we talk about the campaign. Between fighting the voiceless and frankly mindless hordes of the Tyranids for so long, I really did miss an enemy that responded with anything resembling respect for the Space Marine. You have 2 AI companions that run around with you, which can be swapped out for human players for a co-op experience. The AI ones aren't all that great at helping, but they do get you back up when you've been downed. They have their own special abilities, and once in a while they even use them. But I didn't really notice them, which I'm guessing on harder difficulties would be a problem. Their lack of contribution probably becomes very obvious, but most of the time I didn't even see them. No one really runs from the Space Marine in this. No one has an ounce of self-preservation. They just fight to the bitter end and get splattered. Later in the game, events transpire that this does change up a little bit, but without going into spoilers, you don't have to wait too long before you can look forward to a little bit more variety. There are a couple ways to recover health. One involves the Medicaid packs, which are just healing packs from every other game. You can use them to restore a fairly considerable amount of your health, they're harder to find. In order to locate one, you kind of have to explore the map a little bit. They're mostly linear when you get a mission, but occasionally you'll see a corridor that you can go down, and if you do, you might be rewarded with either a Medicaid pack or a data slate, something to give you some more information. So that's one way to do it. You can also get downed in the middle of combat. If your health is really low, you could just allow yourself to get knocked down, and then one of your teammates will get you back up. And that actually restores a significant amount of your health and gives you back full armor. You can only do it a certain number of times before you die for good and have to restart that checkpoint, but that's one tactic you could use to solve your health problem. You also can get this relic that lets you self-res when you go down, and when you use that, it will cure your mortal wound, as they call it, the thing that basically means that you won't be able to be resed again. Couple your health with the 3 armor points I mentioned, and that's the resource management of the game. When you get hit, you'll lose the armor fast, even on normal mode. The enemies can chew through it real quick. You can't just plow through everything without being ripped up, so there's some reason to parry and dodge and all that stuff. You can restore your armor with an execution. Bigger enemies grant more armor for the execution, while the smaller guys only give 1 point back. There are no upgrades in the game, so there's no way to make your weapons hit harder or to have more hit points or armor. That's kind of good and bad. You can't really rely on a skill tree to make you eventually OP. Different weapons are more about a unique style of fighting rather than to make you more powerful per se. I tended to go with the plasma rifle and the power sword when I unlocked them, but the melta-gun did make short work of more powerful enemies, usually with 2, maybe 3 hits, and you'd be able to execute them. Whereas with my plasma rifle, it could take 20, 30, even 40 hits to get a particularly strong enemy down. Boss fights tended to be kind of a mixed bag. None of them were particularly hard, but they were time consuming because the enemies just absorbed hundreds of rounds, plenty of melee strikes, which contributes to my number one frustration. By the end of the campaign, I was tired of playing, not because of the story, but because I'd see an enemy I knew would take 20 shots and just sigh. Ultimately, that fatigue extended to the physical as well. So not only are you having to just unload on them, but the game is more challenging your endurance as a player rather than your skill. I barely had to dodge some of the bosses, just kind of move around a little bit. I didn't even need the dodge button per se to survive a fight on the normal difficulty, but just unloading on the guy just became tedious, and that kind of sucked. So I did not enjoy that part, but you know, maybe that's something that other people enjoy. I hadn't played a game like this in a long time, where it's sort of linear and you just fight mobs and you just move from point A to point B. I've been playing MMOs and a little bit more open-ended stuff, so take that for what it's worth. Campaign. I didn't think you'd play the original guy from Space Marine again, so it surprised me to find out otherwise. I didn't watch a whole lot of early footage. I didn't listen to reviews before I bought the game. I just kind of went with it. So I probably should have known, but whatever. This game picks up 100 years after the last game, and the guy's name is Titus. He finds himself demoted, but back with the Ultramarines because he took a stint with the Death Watch, and now he's ready to fight a Tyranid threat on a planet. He's assigned a couple new companions, and they go off to do missions. There are 6 campaign missions, but they are very long, especially the last one. After each one, you return to the battle barge, which is just basically your big base of operation where you can mess around with your loadout, talk to different people, build some story. Frankly, this slowed the game down a lot more than I would have liked, and it's one of the things I preferred about the first game. In that, you moved through the city and it would tell the title of the next chapter, but you never did a launch mission thing. You just sort of moved through the world, and you didn't have to assemble to do it like you do in a co-op game like, say, Darktide or something. You just moved through it, and it was more immersive. But, that game didn't have co-op for the story missions either. The first game also had Mark Strong playing as Titus, and he brought this sort of smooth confidence to the character. And while I love the new actor, he's absolutely great. He's a lot more aggressive and gruff, and maybe that's a reasonable progression for a guy who just spent 100 years in the Death Watch. I don't know. I'm also just super fond of Mark Strong, so it was hard for me to make that transition. I'd say that the campaign is mostly fun, but it just didn't quite click as a narrative for me. Breaking up the missions, fighting Tyranids, not really getting to know any of the people around the character too well, it just made the experience flat. I did enjoy when some of the companions would talk about their previous campaigns and throw out a few anecdotes. That was awesome stuff, but I just wanted more, I guess. Even though the data slates kind of provided a little bit of information about what was going on, it was so unnecessary because you had to go and find it. And in some cases, it wasn't super obvious that you could even wander like that. So I'm sure I missed quite a few of the data slates. It's one of the reasons I'm sure people go back and replay them. But the more you look at the plans that the company has made for this game, the more it's obvious that they were really excited about the co-op aspect to give you something to do with friends. And while it's not quite a live service or anything like that, nothing like Darktide, it definitely has that focus. And if that's the kind of game you're looking for, that's fantastic. This is made obvious by the fact that when you finish, it directs you to try the operations missions list, which are basically co-op specific missions where you can customize a Marine with one of several classes and then do things that were basically parallel to the campaign. So there are occasions where Titus tells another group of Marines to go off and blow something up, and those are part of the operations missions. There's currently 6 of them, and one of them is how I captured the gameplay that I'm talking over here. The mission took about 30 minutes to do, which honestly is a little too long in my opinion. I'd rather them last around 15 minutes at the most myself. I kind of like quicker events that you could do a lot faster. Not just because I'm impatient, but because there are technical glitches. Maybe somebody quits halfway through because, they've got some other obligation. I don't know. I guess that any sort of co-op activity just works better for me if they're a little bit shorter. But, that's not for everyone. Some people would rather have a committed time frame to play something and really dive into a mission and get some things done. Just about the time you're getting your rhythm, maybe a mission ends for you, and that would kind of suck. So I understand that perspective, and I'm not critical of the time frame. Just for me, I would have rather them be a little shorter. It was kind of fun to play as a Blood Angel running around with the other folks to do the mission. It's not really an experience I needed. If I wanted to do a co-op adventure game, I just load up Darktide. In that, you can matchmake just as easily as you can in this. They don't quite have private group matches yet in Space Marine 2. It's part of the roadmap. Ultimately, in Darktide, the bosses aren't even as bullet spongy as they are in Space Marines. And I always felt like, while I was playing Space Marine, that Darktide had weightier combat. In other words, when I hit someone with a melee weapon in Darktide, I felt it more than in Space Marine 2. Often when you're killing smaller mobs, while the animation is there and the sound is there, there's just something about the feeling that you're just hitting air and you just happen to be seeing explosions of gore. Maybe like smacking some jello. I don't know. It's very strange. And I could be very much alone in that. When you're fighting the bigger enemies who can block and attempt to dodge, that sense goes away. and I do feel the weight of combat, and I really do feel like I'm hitting them with a massive chain sword and shooting them. They respond in a specific way that just gives it some gravity. Darktide does that better, in my opinion. Space Marine 2, with all of the basic mobs, it's not really there. And I just have to reiterate that in the co-op mode, you are still just dropping 20, 30 rounds into some of the medium mobs. And sometimes they still just bounce away or knock you down. And it gets old kind of fast. So I don't mean to labor on about that, but that really bothers me. So, future state of the game. As we look forward, their roadmap mentions that in September we'll see a battle barge sparring arena, which I'm not entirely sure what that is, but I'm kind of guessing it's a place to practice with other players, or maybe just do one-on-one. They're also adding ultra-wide monitor support and private PvE lobbies, so that's what they consider Season 1. Season 2 will bring some more PvE missions and an even harder difficulty in case you like to feel like you're using an airsoft gun, and then some Dark Angel stuff. Not sure what they're going to do with that. I would hope that those PvE missions come real quick, because the 12 missions that you do have available to run are probably going to get old really fast, especially if they're that long. They've got some stuff about Season 3 and 4 in the plan, which is cool, I guess. I mean, I did spend $100 on the game, but for my part, I kind of doubt that I'll even have it installed in 2025, let alone be gagging for these features. There are way too many other things coming out, and while I will admit that I'm kind of a gaming locust, I don't know a lot of people who go back to games for more than a few minutes after, they finished it. Maybe they hop in just to see what's different, see if it'll catch them again. I just don't know too many people who are like, oh my goodness, I've gone way deep into so-and-so game again. Especially one that had a definitive narrative campaign. While in this one, I did feel like there is room to see more stuff. They definitely left it open-ended. One of the things about these games is that unless this was all planned and they already have that content pretty much done and just waiting to be released, sometimes continuing the story feels very tacked on, and it doesn't necessarily have the sort of narrative gravitas of the original release. This game may not have that problem because they sort of took a step back from Space Marine 1 and made this more of a launching missions and just running around killing mobs and moving on to the next part. So it could survive it, and it could be very interesting. I guess we'll just have to see. All around, Space Marine 2 was a fun experience. I do regret paying extra to get that early access. I was just impatient for something new. I don't really see myself going too much deeper into the co-op game mode, nor am I particularly interested in their plan for the future. I do believe this was good, and I think people will enjoy it for regular price. If you only care about the single player, though, it's roughly 12 hours for the campaign, and so I'd buy it on sale. I had a feeling the first game was longer when I finished this one, but I was actually wrong. I checked and I finished that one in only 7 hours. So this does have more gameplay, even if the narrative isn't quite as interesting to me specifically. Also, leveling up in the operations part of the game looks like it'll be seriously grindy, though they do want to prolong the experience, so I'm not entirely surprised. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thanks for watching, and like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. And enjoy exterminating Tyranids. A lot of Tyranids.